Welcome to our podcast, Resilient Heroes, where we are dedicated to showcasing the incredible journeys and contributions of women in the field of emergency management. I'm your host, Laura James. The Resilient Heroes and BCG team are closely watching Hurricane Milton as it approaches, and our thoughts are with all of the communities impacted by its path. To the emergency managers, first responders, and partners who are on the front lines preparing to protect lives and communities, we are sending strength, support, and gratitude to everyone involved in these critical efforts. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce someone that was just introduced to me. And over the course of a couple of weeks, I've had a wonderful chance to get to know this person. Her career has touched many branches of emergency management, and she has gained experience throughout her career that I can say is really second to none in terms of following a dream and identifying your goals. So please join me in welcoming Amy Shadkamyan from City of Palmdale, California. Amy, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
So you and I have had a chance to chat about your career and the last over a decade in emergency management. And because of all the experience that you have gained, and really you are a self-starter is what I would call you. You identified your dreams, you went after them, and you have been not just a mentor for others, but you continue to mentor as you grow in your career. So thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'm going to start off by asking you what inspired you to pursue a career in emergency management?
I think there is a defining moment in every individual's life, right? That they know, hey, this is the path I want to go down. And for me, mine was really, it was a passion in fire. I've always had a passion for rescue, but really wasn't clear kind of like what I was going to do. Of course, I was going to be a firefighter. There was that. But, I knew I wanted to have a family at the same time. So, I got my undergraduate degree in economics, right? And the reason I did that is, well, because mom did it. And I had no other idea of what I was going to do. And actually, it was in that subject that one of my professors like, well, have you heard of emergency management? And I said, well, yeah, I wasn't too familiar with it, but I get the concept, right?
In principle, yeah.
And so I was like, I looked it up and I was like, no, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is my path. I get to be a part of, the rescue world. I get to make a difference. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I actually enjoy reading about instead of the demand and supply chart. So I was more inclined to that, and I went for it, and I started my master's degree in emergency management from American Military University. And at the same time, I knew that I had to get experience in this field. You're not just going to, have a degree and get in. So I started putting things in place to start preparing me to be able to do both. But the inspiration really, again, is you get to make a difference. You still get to go home some nights, right, on time.
Yep.
But you still get to have some fun and play. So it was a good choice.
And so you mentioned there originally you were really interested in the fire side, where, which we know is one element of emergency management, the inside the yellow tape, that operations perspective. But what I'm sort of hearing is that you wanted a more wholesome approach where it would allow you to have more of an impact in terms of planning and operations and not just that response piece. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You really don't understand the career until you get into it, right? I mean, you can theoretically,
That's exactly right.
you study it, you get it. Okay, there's plans you got to develop, how the plans are developed, right? Response, how does response work? What happens in the EOC? I mean, okay, you can read all that. You really don't know what it really entails, and until you get into it, and when you do and you understand, it's also a people's game. You have to build relationships. So it's not just being able to develop the plans and bringing it to life. It's also being able to be a people's person. So you're able to work with others during those kinds of moments. And I have to say that, that my character was there. Again, it was the passion for response. It was the passion for rescue. It was the passion for making that difference in the community. You watch TV. I still remember 9/11. 9/11, I was a high school senior, right? And I was on block schedule. And I
Yeah.
remember watching the tower come down. And I have that in my office right now, actually. I am looking at it. I have that poster, that picture. I have it
Yeah.
posted on my wall because it's a reminder of that moment that changed all of our lives. It changed emergency management. And it really started putting that passion into me. I remember I was thinking I was going to go fire. And I remember watching the firefighters running up the stairs, and
Yes.
thinking, I could do that. That is me to go out and help, right? It's just I won't be running up the stairs. I'll be in the EOC, but I'll be coordinating and providing that
Coordinating.
support. Yep.
Exactly right. So that appealed to you, the ability to provide some overall guidance to a response, and then it still allows you to make those connections to the communities. You're just doing it at a different level. Now, you mentioned that you thought about it and you thought, well, I'll find a master's in emergency management and I'll do that. You mentioned that you chose a certain path there. Is there a reason why you chose that master's versus something else?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go emergency management, and I knew that I had a baseline, I guess,
Hmm.
background in response. So I chose that degree, well, for two main reasons. First, the participants of that program I found were actual emergency managers. They were
Practitioners, yep.
doing, yeah, practitioners. They were doing the work. So my
Hmm.
classmates they were walking the walk, right? So when I'm asking questions, they're actually walking the walk. So the perspective that I got was real life perspective. It wasn't just theory. And then of course the second was cost, which is always great, right? We all want to
Yes.
save a little bit on our higher education, but really, my classmates. I mean, to this day, I still email some of them. Some of them are retired, of course, but you still have that experience that they bring. So it's not theory you're reading about, but
Well,
it's
now they're
actual
colleagues.
practicality.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now
And
they're
yeah, they're
colleagues.
colleagues. I
Hmm.
find it funny actually to even look at them as colleagues sometimes because I remember, I was this young girl in trying to get into emergency management and learning, and they were already doing it, and now, over 10 years later, yeah, I look at them, I go, we're colleagues now, and a lot of them actually told me that they go, you're not just a mentee or you're not just a classmate anymore, you're a colleague now, and it was
Hmm.
actually really eye-opening. I felt like I had actually grown up for the first
You.
time when I seen them. But
So,
no, it was just because it was practicality. That's the
yep.
one thing about that program that I appreciate so much was that I got the practical side of emergency management. It wasn't just here, read this theory, read this book, and write a paper on it. I actually got the real practicality of how it was actually done.
And so I think that's important for our listeners to hear is that there's multiple pathways to a career in emergency management for women and, well, for anyone, but for women specifically. And yours is a path where you found your way here after your undergrad. You decided to go and complete your master's in emergency management. And I asked you this question a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to ask you again now because we know that there's probably people listening thinking, well, I can't afford to do my master's right now. But Amy said it brought a lot of success to her. Do you think you need to have your master's in emergency management?
No,
I would
no.
agree with you. Yeah. So tell me why.
You know, when they say when you get older, you get wiser.
Hmm.
I think we've all gotten a little wiser in understanding kind of what it really takes to get into some of these fields. And I told you a couple of weeks ago, I have two young daughters. If they grow up and they tell me, Mom, I want to be a doctor, a scientist, or a lawyer, or an engineer, I'm going to say, you're going to college. If
Right.
they come to me and they say, Mom, I want to follow your footsteps and be in emergency management, no, you're not. Because it's not necessary. I think, the practicality is more important. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how I actually got my first title.
So I was about to transition us there and you beat me to it. So tell me how you went from master's student in emergency management to your first emergency management job.
And absolutely. And it's kind of tied into why I say you kind of don't need the degree.
Okay, tell us.
So the degree, yeah, gives you all this knowledge and the books and you read a lot, and that's great. But it doesn't prepare you for what is actually required of you to get that first title. And what is required of you is actually having to have done the job. So when you go for these jobs, the first thing, especially when it's so specialized, like in our field, they take a look at, well, what have you done in the past? Have you ever done training and exercise? Have you ever developed a plan before? Do you know what HCEP is, right? Have you ever activated? And that's actually now one of my interview questions when I hire coordinators in emergency management. Have you ever activated? Because it tells me a lot about the experience. You know what it takes. You've walked the walk. So
yeah.
When the degree, what I realized wasn't as important to my hiring manager, and more on that in a minute, than me having the experience. So what I did is this. I actually realized, I knew that I had to have a title. They were not just going to give me a job, even a part-time job in emergency management, if I had no experience. So while I was going to school, at the same time, what I did is I started a job with Garda Cash Logistics. And for those of you who don't know, listening, what that is the armored cars that pick up and drop off cash. So I actually took on that position as an ATM supervisor, and everything that I pretty much made from that job for about 2 years while I was in my program, I saved. And I knew that I was going to use that income that I had made to provide for me until I got the experience so I can get the title. So what I did is I saved enough. I was on the tail end of my graduation. I made an appointment with Santa Barbara County Office of Emergency Management, and I went. I'm a gaucho, so went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergraduate. Made an appointment with the director. I walked in. His name was Ryan Rockerbrand. I said, Ryan, I'm going to volunteer for you. I just need you to give me the experience so I can have the title. And he said, sure. So for months, I paid rent, food, lived off of instant ramen, and I volunteered my time with the Office of Emergency Management just to earn the title so that I could put it on my resume and get my first paying job. Well, I guess I was doing a great job because
hold on. Amy, I'm going to stop you right now to say that I have not met anyone in my career to date in North America who has a story quite like that. So you identified as an undergrad person that you were you were going to do your master's and worked another job. So this type of planning is unheard of for a young person. Never mind walking in sort of unannounced. You made an appointment, but walking in and saying, basically, I need a job so that I can get experience, so that I can be employable, and please let me help you. That strategy is not one I've ever heard. So let me applaud you for that and say, holy cow, that is amazing. Now tell us how that transitioned for you.
Yeah, so absolutely. He was like, yeah, sure. He started off with training and exercise. So I worked with the emergency manager, was overlooking and training and exercise. I touched a little bit of planning, but during this process, I guess I did a good enough job that they said, hey, guess what? You're going to get a title and we'll pay you for it. I was like, wow. So it was really a small gig, but that was it. That was my in. And then I got picked up by UC Santa Barbara. So the emergency manager was at an exercise that I helped develop. And he came over to me and said, I have been following you for the last few months. Do you know business continuity? And I said, yeah, of course. It's part of recovery. We know it. And even if I had never done it before, I wasn't going to say no. So I remember his name was Jim Caesar. He's still there, amazing emergency manager. He said, okay, if you can do business continuity, I need to hire a continuity manager for the university. Would you apply? I said, absolutely. I applied and they liked me. And I got my first official full-time gig as a business continuity manager for UC Santa Barbara. And I would oversee parts of emergency management with him. So that was my first official gig, full-time. Prior to that was the county, but it wasn't full time. You know, it wasn't an official EM position. So I started with UC Santa Barbara. I did business continuity and emergency management. I oversaw multi-million dollars worth of research, developed plans to ensure the continuation of that research. And it was great. It was my alma mater. It was amazing. It was actually kind of weird too, I'll be honest, because they're paying me so that I can repay my student loans that pay them for my undergraduate. So it was this weird triangle.
Full circle.
Full circle. So I was at UC Santa Barbara for over 2 years, and then I got the great opportunity to come back home to LA. I got hired on as UCLA's emergency management specialist. From there, my director at the time left, so I was there for over 3 years. For a short term, became interim director, but got a great opportunity actually at that very moment from Los Angeles Union Station. And so for those of you who are listening who don't know, Union Station is one of the oldest transportation hubs west of the Mississippi. So it's a very historic station, very central in downtown LA. And I got the great opportunity to become director of emergency management for Los Angeles Union Station. So I got to work with Metro, all the different trains. It was a great experience at Union Station. Yeah, and it was all during that beginning of COVID. So here I am, a new director, and COVID has begun. And
drinking
here's
from the fire hose.
Oh my God, yes. And train station, yeah, talk about social distancing. That was a unique experience in itself. So
that in itself, so for all of us in emergency management, COVID was a challenge. And I mean, for all of us, we heard the word unprecedented almost daily during those 2 years when, there was heightened COVID awareness and operations and response. But I mean, starting a new job as a director, because it's a transportation hub, the requirements are totally different. You're dealing with umpteen different issues at one time. Did you feel success during that time? Were you able to settle into the position? How did it feel to be kind of new and on the precipice of a global response and because you're in a transit hub, really that's the first point of contact, as we know, for lots of things that were happening. So how did that make you feel?
Just like you said, drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
Here I am excited, right? It's my first leadership position, and then COVID begins. And I also have to prove myself at the same time. So the executives that I was reporting to are old school men. And here's this new young female director in emergency management. And it was intimidating at some points, but then also kind of challenging of, forcing myself actually to say, no, you have a voice. If you're the subject matter expert, speak it, whether they agree or don't agree, you've got to build your voice. And I think that's one thing also, just in the topic of women emergency management, is I think one area that we have to build, and for anyone young listening to this podcast, you have to learn to build your voice and be strong at that. And whether they agree with you or not is irrelevant, doesn't matter. Make sure you practice speaking out your mind and speaking out, because that's a skill set that I think as women from a young age we're taught not to, right?
Yes.
No, women are soft-spoken and even culturally, like, women just don't, speak out. They're always polite and they're always, accepting. And well, tell you the truth, if you're going to be a woman in emergency management, that's out the window. Because it's still, in a lot of ways, in some of the agencies we work with, it's still male dominated. And they're not really going to listen unless you make them listen. So I think building my voice was really the takeaway for that moment for me in my career. And COVID on top of that, because you're getting conflicting information. You have executives who agree and executives who don't. And they want certain things a certain way. No, we can't shut it down. We're going to lose too much money, but then there's lives at stake. So there's this balancing act I was doing at the same time while building my confidence and building my voice. And it was one of those, it's a moment in life that I'm never going to forget, I think. It's
I
your
think,
first leadership position. No,
yeah,
I'm never going to forget it, because here's this, I see myself as this little girl, even though I'm strong, in a room full of executives, with Metro and Union Station, and I'm telling them, no, we can't be doing certain things, right?
yeah.
And it wasn't received well on some parts, and some parts were. But I said what I had to say. I was strong and opinionated all the way through and factually based. And I would walk out of those meetings. I kid you not. I would walk out of these meetings, sometimes go in my office and sit there and go, oh no, they're going to fire me for speaking my mind. And at the
Yes.
same time, I'm happy that I did.
So, and I really actually, I love that you touched upon really sort of finding it's it's not even your voice, it's sort of finding your professional personality. And we all have to do that, I think, regardless of gender. But as you sort of alluded to, women in EM, especially in director roles and senior leadership roles, while we are beginning to have a foothold there, it is a different environment for us. And sometimes assertiveness for women can be seen as non-palatable, I would say. And that's regardless of the industry. And we're seeing a lot of that in the media these days. And so I just want to touch on that for a moment. So, that is something that I think younger women who may be listening right now should really figure out what your voice is and what is your professional persona, if that's different than your private persona, and how can you find your path and keep that voice. And I want to kind of stay on that theme just to say that while you were struggling with this new senior leadership position in a global pandemic, you're also managing a global pandemic with two young children as a mom. And so that snapshot in history is, for those of us that were part of responses, big or small, we're also managing multiple things at one time. So, and I think that is not unique for women across the EM profession, is that whatever's happening for us as responders, we may or may not be dealing with that at the same time as mothers or caregivers for others in our family. And so we're constantly thinking about the impacts, not only to our organization and our communities, but also to the people that we support on the back end. And that's, something that is commonly overlooked, I think, those challenges. So you were there at Union Station, you lived to tell, but you're not there
Yes.
anymore. So tell us where you are now.
Yes, so I am not there anymore. I got actually great opportunity up here at City of Palmdale. So I actually came up to Antelope Valley,
Okay.
and it was a personal slash career decision, I would say. For me, at this point in my, well, at that point, and it's recent. So at this point in my life, I really wanted to be more of an involved mother. I knew that my purpose and focus was my kids now.
Hmm.
And much as I love my career, and it had been my focus for over 10 years, right before the kids came, and they're very young, so they've only been around for 3 years. So,
Yeah.
but before that, my career, everything was my career. And I'll share this with you and the listeners is, sometimes I've chosen career over
Hmm.
family and personal matters, and I regret that in some ways, but I don't, and then I do. So my career was the focus, right, of my life, and proud of it, accomplished a lot. But then when I knew I was going to become a mom, I knew that was it, that
Hmm.
they were my focus. But we still have to do a job, right? And we still got to put food on the table, right? So the career goes on. So I chose to come to a smaller jurisdiction, still with its challenges, of course.
Hmm.
We still have a lot of challenges we got to face, but it gave me the work-life balance I needed to not only be able to continue my career and provide, but also be a mom, right? And I think that that's the biggest thing for women. I think you're right about that. we as women, and maybe some will don't want to be mothers, and I respect that, but we as women, I think majority, we all want to go down that path, right? We all want the children and the family, and there's more of an expectation, right, from society, from our families,
absolutely.
to be a
Absolutely.
mother. And we will take care. I mean, come on, we still do it. I still do it. I'm 40, and when I call my dad, I go, "Hi, Dad, how are you? Good. Where's Mom?" Right? So we all do it. Mom is the center point of everything, right?
And I would say we also traditionally, and this is a generalization similar to yours, but it is, I would say, a fair one based upon the cross section of women that I know. It's not just our kids. We also become the caregivers when our parents need
Mm-hmm.
caregivers. And then we also may become the caregivers for our partners' parents as they age. So the caregiver role goes far beyond just being the mom, though that is sort of the traditional. But I would say, yeah, and for all the women in EM I know, they are either struggling managing their children or children they've inherited in relationships. I was looking for the word there that we always use, but I can't think of it. But stepchildren, and or parents. And I'm at the age now where I am, caregiving for parents is it's tough. It's almost as difficult as caregiving for your children. And you find yourself part of that sandwich generation. And not those responsibilities don't stop for us when the EOC is activated. So a couple of things I'm going to take off of that particular point, and then I'm going to draw you back. We talked about, caregiving and being a parent. And you told me a couple of weeks ago that your frame of mind has really changed since becoming a mom. So, and you alluded to that here, that you put your whole self into your career, which we know because you told us how you got here, and that really required careful planning and thought. Emergency management is one of those careers where we're on call 24/7. I mean, we take vacations, but we don't know when the unknown will hit. And many times in my life, I have ended up working, 24, 42, however many hours I'm needed. And I've been lucky to have a support system to support my dependents around that. But you've had a little shift in how you feel about that lately. So tell me, we both have, bonded around having management or senior executive, really say that the work needs to get done, your community needs you, and you've had a bit of a shift in mindset. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so for me, and I said my kids are number one.
Yeah.
So
Which I love
what I
that. I love
yeah,
that.
and
You've
it
you've
should be
made
like
that
that.
known.
It should be like that. I look, I intentionally, and for many couples, perhaps it's unintentional, right? It's a night of passion with a bottle of
Hmm.
tequila, and then they have their kids. For me, it was an intentional decision. I intentionally got pregnant. So I knew from day one that they were my purpose. Like, I'm bringing
Yep.
them here, then I'm going to give them 100%. So what I did is I've planned. So my family, thank God right now, my parents are able to support, right? I have planned for if I have to be called out, here's what's going to happen. If my family, my kids are okay, great. I will be there if roads are open, right?
Yes.
But if my kids need me, if my family needs me, but my kids particularly, no. And I've made that clear here at work. So one thing I did is I actually was very clear with my director and my city manager on my priorities and that I am a mother. Even though I am an emergency manager, my priority is my kids. So if something happens, my kids are going to come first. So we need to structure it in such a way where if I can't come up or I'm not coming up because I am choosing my kids, that we have backups in place. So I've made it clear to my staff, to my backups, and to my management that my kids will take priority over any disaster. And I know some emergency managers listening to this, no, you can't do that. You took an oath. But I took an oath to be a mother, which is way more important to me and I think more critical. So what I've done is I've transitioned from I will always be here 100% to if I'm able to be here, I will be here. But if my kids need me, sorry, my backups need to step up. the EOC needs to activate and staff needs to do what they need to do without me because my kids come first. So I've made it clear to my work, to my colleagues, to my own leadership where my priorities stand. And that doesn't mean that you are any less of an employee or any less of an emergency manager. It means that once you clearly identify your priorities in life, it is easier for you to plan for them. It's actually just like our EOPs and plans that we plan for. You identify those threats, right? And you identify those top priorities, and then you're able to plan, right, for those. So it's the same thing in life. And my kids are my priority. Their well-being means more to me than anything else in any career. So I've created in such a way an environment and been so clear on my priorities at work that we created backups for me that, hey, listen, Amy might not be coming up, so we might have to activate this EOC without her and run it without her.
Yeah, you're
until
not the
she's able
single
to.
point of failure anymore.
No, and you know what? It shouldn't be. We all know it shouldn't be, regardless of whether you're a mother, not a mother, doesn't matter. It shouldn't be. But I think as emergency managers, we also forget that we're also human. And there might be an event that we're not able to come up, right? Or it might be my parents that need us, or your parents, or
Yes.
So I think understanding that as emergency managers, no, we are not available 24/7. Yes, we do have limitations, and then we have to put other things other than our career as priority and have balance for it. Because if we don't, I'll be honest with you, you're going to look back and it's just going to be a career, and a good one at that, but it's just going to be a career. Now, if you want it to be a great career and you want it to be something where you look back and you smile at, my recommendation to everyone listening, find your balance. It doesn't have to be family. It doesn't have to be kids, but find your balance, because you have your career and then you have everything else. And you need to find that balance, because I think it makes you a better emergency manager if you have a balance outside of just your career.
So I think that message is one that is becoming much more clear post-COVID. I feel as though many folks in emergency management have taken the last couple of years to really reprioritize. And I think that the voices of women are starting to become part of that conversation about what does a healthy work-life balance look like. And I think it's very clear to me anyway, and in discussions with you, that women are leading the charge on some of those discussions in emergency management. What does it look like to have a fulfilling career? I don't think it's necessarily all the medals and being the one to answer the phone first. I think it's exactly what you're doing, which is, how can I be the best EM professional I can be, but also be the best mom I can be, and sister and daughter, and all the other things that make a fulsome life instead of a fulsome career. And that is a really positive message, Amy. Like I really think you're bringing that
100%. And there's one thing, like, everybody has to remember this, and it's regardless of whether you're an emergency manager or any other career, right? Here's the thing, and I think we talked about this too, and I asked you, I said, if you were to win the lottery today, would you come back and do this job? And I'm going to be honest with you, as much as I love doing it, no. When I have all this money, I get to travel, I get to do whatever. No, I would probably volunteer, right, at some aspects to be a part of it, because I think at the core of who we are, we like helping people, right? And that's kind of why we all do what we do. But no, you wouldn't. And so with that in mind, remember one thing. We have to work for a living, but we get to have the great opportunity of doing something we enjoy for a living to put food on the table. And so you have to remember, we don't work, we don't live to work, we work to live.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. We have to all remember that you can give yourself 100%, right? 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, great. And that's great. But remember to balance, because this isn't all that you're about. This is a career that you chose because you enjoy it, you want to do something to give back, and it puts food on the table. Right? So I think it's important to be realistic about life, and it's important to be realistic about your career, that it's a great career, great choice, and it's super fun, and it can have stressful moments, and it, but at the end of the day, it's a career to put food on the table. So don't stop your life from living or having a balance or going after your passion, whatever that may be, because you want to sacrifice that, or work more or put in more hours. You're never going to look back in life and say, you know what, I did so great, I worked an extra 2 hours that day and I got those plans. You're never going to do that. So I think
Yes.
the key is to give 100% when we have to, and also give ourselves 100% when we're not here at work, because you deserve that, you've earned it. And so I think that balance is so important, and I see a lot of women actually forgetting that, especially the younger generation, because I think we still, even though we've come far, right? As far as
Hmm.
equality goes and gender
Hmm.
equality, but I think we still have a long way to go. And I think a lot of the younger generation still feeling that they have to prove themselves. So they
They
put in
do.
the extra
100%.
hours, right? They'll take that extra shift, right? They'll
100%.
sacrifice that because they want to prove themselves. And I think that's where we will suffer as women, is if we
And
sacrifice that second part of our lives to prove something that we don't have to prove anymore.
well, I shared this with you, and I'm not shy to share it with listeners, but I found myself multiple times throughout my career, and as a single mom, there are times when it is challenging for me to report for duty. That doesn't mean I'm less dedicated or less intelligent or less capable. I may be far more than people that are part of the team that I'm working on, but there are particular times that come to mind, which I would really like these phrases to no longer be part of our vernacular when my daughter is making her way into the workforce. But I have had it said in meetings, well, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not a single parent, so I'll be here whenever you need me. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with my aptitude or ability to work, or even the hours you've asked me to work. What that is pitting coworkers against coworkers, and it has nothing to do with ethic or anything else. It's just simply gender-based discrimination as far as I'm
It
concerned.
is. And I'm sad to say that in some ways I've seen women do it to other women.
Of course. We've talked about that as well. Yes. I shared with you, I had a director way back in the day. This is over 25 years ago now, who her strategy was, if you don't have kids, then you work the holidays. And I remember sitting in a meeting and thinking to myself, well, I am a kid, like I'm somebody's kid, and I have friends and family that I might like to spend the holidays with. And so it's really about, I think, having those discussions corporately, but even women need to start supporting women, um, because we are all important to the people in our lives, regardless of what our stations are in them.
It is, and it goes back to what I said earlier about setting those priorities clear and making them clear.
Hmm.
So when I mean, I think some emergency managers are probably listening to this like, oh my God, you told them what? I'm like, yeah, I actually did tell my city manager and my director that even during an emergency, my kids come first. If I gotta stay home with them because they're not feeling good, I'm staying home with them, regardless of if it's an emergency or not. Because I'm telling you right off the bat, this is my priority. It doesn't make me less of an emergency manager. It doesn't,
No.
make me any less of an employee. What it does, it makes me human. And it should make you realize that at least Amy has her priorities on straight. This is her priorities. Now, for some people, it's their career. And I have colleagues, female colleagues, that it's their career. And I respect them for that. That's their baby. And that's great. If that is truly both your work and your life, that's great. Nurture it.
I
Push it forward.
suppose, but we haven't been able to have the real conversations, right? So I really feel that those women haven't been able to have candid, clear conversations and haven't been supported in doing so in whatever organization they're working in. Um, because these are conversations that we should all be having, regardless of our gender. What can we do to support each other in the workplace? Um, okay, I want to flip for a second because we've been talking a lot about the challenges of women, and I know you have some great insight into this. So, do you feel that women excel in any specific capacity in the emergency management field, or do we bring anything unique in your experience that you want our listeners to think about?
Yeah, and this is interesting question and topic. Remember we were talking about this last time we spoke, but I thought about it a little bit more as I was driving home. So, as women, I think we naturally have this, right, maternal instinct, right?
Hmm.
And genetically and biologically, and I think evolution has obviously given women certain traits, right?
Of
They
course.
have to be pregnant for 9 months and survive, right? And they have to like care for this child, right? And they got to deal
Yep.
with the teenage attitude, right?
Yep.
And not that men don't. I mean, men don't give birth, but you know, not that men are not parents and supportive in that area. They're not. I think you know, genetically been designed right to be able to
Yes.
multitask and be able to plan and for everything. And I think women, we as mothers, you do it every day. We plan,
Yep.
we strategize how we're going to pick up, drop off, when, right? Who wants what, you know, for dinner? Who wants what toy, right? Who
Yeah.
doesn't like blueberries? Who likes
Who has this
strawberries?
special need? Who's this? Who's
As
that? Yeah.
exactly. And as women, we naturally we're planners, we're organizers, we're supportive. I think, and obviously it's not every single woman. I'm not trying to stereotype, but generally speaking, I think women, just by our nature, um, have the ability to do emergency management in a different way. And what
Yes,
I
I
mean in a
agree.
different way is the nurture approach that a female emergency manager takes is more rounded. I don't know if that makes sense, than sometimes your male counterpart. See, I've worked with both, and I can tell you that for a male, it's like, okay, we have to do this, then this, then this, and this, right? And
Yep.
that's it. For a female, it goes in, well, we have to do this, but we have to consider other factors. Then there's this. We also have to, there's more of a nurture approach to it. And I think that helps. And it also helps as a mother understanding what my community really
Hmm.
uh issues are going to be, right?
Hmm.
So we've seen it, you know, mothers and their children picking up from school, you know, reunification, right? Like
Hmm.
knowing what that parent is feeling and the fear that they're feeling helps me plan better and understanding, okay, here's the feeling they're going to have, here's how I can approach it, and here's what I can do differently for planning purposes to make parents feel more at ease. Another great example, UCLA, right? We had those major fires come through. We had parents nonstop calling from, you know, Northern California and other parts of the country. Hey, are my kids okay? What are you guys going
Yep.
to do? I'm worried about evacuation. I'm worried about the fire. And you're able to understand that, hey, you know, parents and mothers particularly have a different way of looking at it. So as an emergency manager, being a woman and a mother, I'm better understanding when I'm planning or I'm conducting some of our meetings to be able to incorporate kind of that feeling the community has into
So
these meetings.
I totally agree. And I call it the empathetic lens. And I think that sort of maternal instinct that you speak of, it is something really unique that we bring to the table. And just like you, I can think about some of the major responses that I have been part of. And while we do need to check the boxes and perhaps, and I will look at the operations board and understand what the priorities are, but because I look at it with a whole community lens and maybe a little bit more empathetic and less, ABC formulaic operation, the end goal is the same, but perhaps we can reach more of our goals and have a better outcome for more people if we're looking at it with an empathetic lens across the response instead of ABC has to happen, then one, two, three has to happen. And if all that happens, we'll worry about the other stuff later. But it's the other stuff that if the community starts seeing that some of those things being activated and implemented, then they start feeling like they're part of it and they will come to the table as a community. And we will also hear at that point the things we haven't heard to date. It's sort of like when you're running a reception center after a large evacuation. we actually want to hear the voices of people we're serving in the reception center, you know? So I may have a drive by and walk around and say, "How are you doing? Are the services you're being provided with okay?" And I get it
Yeah.
at the initial outset of an incident, you just want to make sure the fires are being put out, the people are being rescued. But at some point, you start to turn, right, a little bit, and having that empathetic lens to hear the voices of the community can really shift your response in ways that we haven't traditionally. We tick the boxes, we get in our trucks, and we drive home, really. And I think having women in this field starts to put a different lens on things and starts to shift a little bit how we bring the response together. Instead of a square box, perhaps this is more of a circle, if you know what I'm saying. So I like to hear that you saying that, because it sounds like that is your experience as well, that you feel that having a different lens is starting to create a whole community approach.
It is, and now even leading into recovery,
Mm-hmm.
you understand that, especially like, as women going back to work from COVID, right? Or,
Yes.
we understand the challenges of that. And I think that that helps me clearly understand kind of some of the challenges we're going to face as a community in recovery. It's not just, oh, get the business back up and running, right? Get the roads open.
Exactly. Yep.
It's not just that. Yeah, of course, that's an important part of it. We're not saying it's not. But the how the community takes it and that empathetic lens you're talking about is really important, especially when you're working with your PIO, right? And
Mm-hmm.
putting out messaging. If you are able to do that in the empathetic lens, you're reaching more people and you're building trust. And remember, I said in the beginning, one of the
Exactly.
most important things in your career is understanding how to build relationships. So I think as women, we are a little bit easier in doing that than some of our male counterparts. Not to say they're amazing too. I know some great
Mm-hmm.
male emergency managers, but I think as women, when we bring that empathetic lens or that emotional factor to those meetings, I think that that goes a long way, right?
And it's
And it's
it's
not.
it's
Oh,
interesting that you say, so I use the word empathetic. As soon as you said emotional, some hairs went up on my arm, because here's the thing, and you and I
uh-huh,
both know this. If you use the
uh-huh.
word emotion in an EOC, that is not gonna that is not a buzzword that people want to hear. But that's really what it's coming down to, is there's historically this need to put the emotion of your response aside, even your planning. But if we bring some of that in, that's the only way that we can have these discussions about what's best for the community as a whole, is bringing the emotion in, because it's not science.
And
Rebuilding communities is not science.
I'm gonna push back a little bit.
Okay,
And
push
I'm
on
going to
me.
say that actually, I want to change and make it a cultural change in our field
Hmm.
and women to say, embrace the emotional side.
Yes,
Because I disagree. I think because I bring the emotion, it makes me a better coordinator. It makes me a better emergency manager.
I
Because
agree.
if you are not able to emotionally connect to that community of what's happening, then how can you honestly tell me
You're invested. Yeah.
what your actions are taking is correct. So I think the emotional, if and it's been told to me many times in my career, don't be emotional, you can't act, don't be, the guys won't like that. I don't give a damn if they don't like that. I actually
Yes,
find it now of more of an issue that you don't have the emotions, right? So emotionally speaking, I want to change that culture.
I
Yes,
agree. Yeah.
you need to have emotions to be an emergency manager. Otherwise, why would we choose this career? If we didn't have the emotions to want to help people, then why would you be an emergency manager? And for some of the old school folks that remember, emergency manager is a place to go to retire,
Yes, our fire
right?
chief friends. Yes. Yep.
Exactly. So, there was like, what emotions? You just have to say yes or write this plan and be done with it.
Tick a
No.
box.
Yeah, check the box. No. Is if you're going to be a great emergency manager, and if you're going to be a great female emergency manager, you better bring the emotion. Because
I
without it,
absolutely agree.
you're done. You're dead in the water. If you cannot emotionally understand what that community is going through, what that family is going through, what that family is going through right now because their house burned down, then how can you as an emergency manager make the most impact? How do you change the plans? How do you make those changes if you don't emotionally connect to those people?
I absolutely agree with you. Now, talk to me a little bit, Amy, about the mentors you've had, because you and I connected on this as well. And I have had some amazing mentors throughout my career. I mean, starting fairly early, like as early as high school, I can remember some really amazing mentors. As I've grown in my career, a couple of really amazing female mentors have stood out. I remain in contact with them. They're my go-to folks when not just when I am wrestling with a solution to a problem, but also if I have lost the momentum, or I'm feeling downtrodden, or I'm just plain old burnt out. I find those mentors, not just colleagues, but those folks that have lived through it, and in my case, many of them are retired. But I still reach out to them because I find they have lived through it, right? And for the women that I know that are retired, they were really pioneering some of this in advance of us coming up. And so, talk to me a little bit about the mentors that you've had. I mean, you can name them certainly, but if you don't want to, we can sort of speak in generalities because I feel raising a teenager right now, mentorship is not as key as it used to be. It's not something that is spoken about. In high school, it's not like find a mentor that you can look up to. That's not really a thing that I find the younger generation, they're looking to social media to look for guidance and that self promotion. But I'm wondering, who have you had as mentors? Have they been females? And now I know in a leadership role, you're also working with women. So talk to me about how you feel about mentors. Did you have them? And do you look forward to a career of mentoring women?
Yes, yes,
It's a
and
lot of
yes.
questions.
Yes, yes, and yes. And
Okay.
no, so yeah, I think for me, over 10 years of doing this, I've had good and bad mentors.
Yeah, of
So is it possible to have bad mentors? Absolutely.
course.
And some of them with alternative motives. And I'm not gonna go too much into this, and I'm not gonna give names on the bad ones, but the bad ones know who they are, and we've all had them.
Yep.
And sometimes they try to take advantage of a situation because you're young, you're passionate. They try to take advantage of that, whether it's getting their own work done, making you do it, which it's not in the sense a bad thing. I learned a lot,
Of course.
but at the
Same.
same time, there's this sense of take, take, take. And then I've had the most amazing mentors that they're still my mentors, and they still, no matter what they say, they say you're a colleague of mine, but I'll never ever call them a colleague because I just feel it's so disrespectful because I have such respect for them as my mentor. They will always be my mentor.
Right.
And one of them is Yoli McGlinchey. So Yolanda McGlinchey, she was the emergency manager for the city of Santa Barbara. She was there when I started my career. She is still here. She actually is a manager for Cal OES's training branch with CSTI. She went into training, which she should have been for many, many years because she's so amazing. And she's still a mentor. I still call her probably every other week, whether I am complaining, whether I just need to vent, whether I need to complain about the girls because they just
Yep.
won't potty train. She has become that mentor for me, not only in my career, but also in my personal life. Those are the kinds of mentors that are amazing. And she has guided me through my career. She has told me whether I'm right or wrong in some areas, whether I should, shift, work at it this way. And, let me tell you, she has faced such adversity, just to get to where she is, right? And she has been in the field much longer than we both have.
Mhm.
So she has really, really seen a lot. And to have that knowledge and support and guidance, and just to have somebody say, Amy, I know, I've been there. And it's
Exactly.
just something you got to deal with and find a workaround. Or here's how you do it. And here's what you do. And she still does that for me to this day, over 10 years. And I'll still call her and be like, I just had my town hall meeting and I didn't go well, and here's why. And she'll, listen and she'll give input. And as a female, I appreciate that. And I'll tell you two other things. If you're going to get yourself a mentor, definitely get one in emergency management and somebody that you're comfortable with. So the first thing is, in order to really advance in any career, and I don't care what career it is, you really do need a good mentor. And yes, I do mentor as well. And for that reason of just giving back.
Yes.
So find a good mentor, but find somebody that you feel comfortable with and you trust, not only on a work level, but also on a personal side, because that's going to be important. 2, find the mentor also outside of emergency management. And you're going to be like, what? Amy, really? Yes, because in order to be a good emergency manager, you also have to understand the other worlds around you. So as an emergency manager, we all know we herd cats. So if you're herding cats, you really need to understand how the other cats work. So I would say 2 other mentors, and they're more recent, but they have shaped my career in such a way where not only am I a great emergency manager and I have a great mentor in emergency management, but I also have great mentors outside that teach me not just the EM side of management, but also they're teaching me the admin side of everything else.
Yes.
So those 2 individuals are actually my director, which is Carrie Smith. She is the director of Parks and Rec, which is, I know most people listening are thinking that's odd, emergency management in Parks and Rec. It actually works beautifully. So she's my director. She's my direct report. And she has taught me so much about how to herd cats and how to make a group of different skill sets work together. It's actually made me a better EOC manager. So I'm able to coordinate that room better.
Yep.
And Rhonda Perez, who's our city manager. So she has actually taught me the strong suits of women leadership, right? And how to be a leader and how to fine tune that voice. So she's always taught me, hey, it's good to have a voice, but fine tune it in such a way so that you have a more impactful statement when you're speaking. And so I watch her sometimes in meetings and how she conducts herself and the meeting and how she holds it and how she speaks and when she speaks and what she says. And I've learned a lot from the both of them, and they're not emergency managers. It's about learning how to, again, build that relationship, be a better relationship builder, how to lead, how to be an effective leader, and how to herd cats in different departments. And that's an important mentorship that I've needed in this next phase of my life in emergency management. It's not just emergency management, it's how to make the entire organization work together. And as we all know, emergency managers are the glue and the lubrication of that big machine that makes each part work together. So learning from other directors on how to do that is really important, and I think will set you apart from other emergency managers, and it will actually gain more respect in your organization because you're not just going at them with the EM voice, you are going at them just at that whole leadership management approach, right? So you're not just speaking to them as an emergency manager, you're approaching them in more of a kind of a management style, right? You're not just singling out, hey, here's what we need to do. So I think for me, those 2 individuals have taught me a lot on how to be a manager, a general manager.
Yes.
And Yoli has taught me how to be a great emergency manager. So I think combining the 2 worlds together has made me who I am today. I'm proud to say I have a great organization that I work for. And surprisingly, actually, this is the cool part, and is the city of Palmdale, all of their major directors and our section chiefs are all women. So
that's amazing.
Yes, it is. And so I was kind of like, I'm like, we're all chicks. And we just hired an assistant city manager. His name is Salvador Mendez. He's amazing human being. He's a great guy. And he's the first male that we've introduced into this leadership group. So it was really cool to see that, because like our EOC director, all of our directors are all women. Our public works department female. So it's really nice to see females in different leadership roles, and yeah, they've definitely had an impact on me. So as far as mentorship goes, yes, definitely find someone you're comfortable with. Find someone outside of emergency management too, because you need to learn the other styles of leadership. It's not just an EM. And in order to be a great emergency manager, you also have to mentor. So you have to learn to teach. So I definitely mentored. I've mentored three individuals who I'm proud to say have moved on into the emergency management career. They all came to me in different levels, some of them in their undergrad, some of them in their graduate programs. And absolutely, it was never a question of, will you let me, help? I literally made them volunteers in emergency management and made them interns. They've worked on the city's plan, they've worked on different training programs. They've worked on different exercises. They're actually on call if we need extra help in the EOC if we activate. So I've immersed them into the city's emergency management program because I know that's what they need to learn and that's what they're gonna need to put on their resume, just like me, to be able to get that first position. So just like Ryan gave me my opportunity, if I every time I get the opportunity to give back, I do. And it's never been a no. If you want to be an emergency manager, I'm happy to have you be an intern with me. I will teach you as much as I can, and I will let you touch everything that you need to touch to put it on your resume to be able to get that first gig.
Watch out, Amy, because you just put that offer out on the airwaves.
And I mean that. I absolutely mean that. If they are interested, let them contact you, and I'm okay with you sharing my contact email.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that because you and I both know if we don't do this, it's not just for women, even males. Like, we don't do this, then we don't advance their career, and you don't really give back. And if you don't really give back, then what was the point of your entire beautiful career when you haven't really given back and made sure that that continues, right? The knowledge and the experience that you gain, how do you make sure that that continues? You got to get some interns. And yeah, they screw up. Yeah, they don't know anything, right? They ask a lot of questions, but they're supposed to. And just like we did. And I look at some of them and I see myself 10 years ago, and then I realize some of these folks are going to become the next FEMA administrator.
Yes.
But we have to shape them. And if we don't say yes, and if we don't guide them, and they fall in the wrong hands, as women, we've been there, right? We've been in some of the wrong hands, and I don't want that. So I always like giving back because I see myself, and I remember how scared I was and how driven I was, and I know Yoli took me under her wing and has never let me out, and just for that reason, I give back too.
That's so amazing and such a refreshing thing to hear that you're giving back despite all of the things that you have on the go in your professional and personal life, that you make time to mentor other women. I think that's fantastic. So, Amy, I am going to say thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. And I want to say what an amazing story you have from the beginning of your thoughts about emergency management to where you are now in your career. I mean, what an amazing story to get yourself here. Some of the challenges that you faced have been not dissimilar to those of our listeners. And I think, messages around defining your personality and your persona as a professional EM person, finding your voice, staying assertive, giving back to the EM community, all of the things you've sort of mentioned really ring true to me, and I think to our listeners as well. So with your permission, I will include your contact information for folks that would like to reach out to you. That will be available on the podcast. And I want to say thank you so much. And I feel privileged to have spent this time with you. And just like I find this in emergency management, when you find another woman that you can identify with, I feel like we've made friends for life. So when we run into each other at a conference or anywhere else, I look forward to spending time with you in person.
Likewise, absolutely. And I also want to say, first and foremost, thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot. I love the fact that I get to share my experience, and I hope it helps, someone out there as they're going through this. And also, thank you for doing this podcast. I think, most women in emergency management, I think a lot of us feel like nobody gives us a voice, and I think we're like the forgotten ones. But because you're doing this and putting our stories out there, you're not realizing, but you're making such a big impact on emergency management as the field as a whole, that for years this will be documented, and I hope this guides the next generation. So thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's really important what you're doing and getting the stories out there.
Thanks so much, Amy. I hope you have a lovely week. Good luck with back to school or back to daycare or whatever you have going on next week.
You too.
And we may see you again as we progress and grow in this podcast. Perhaps we will have you come back and chat with us about a project-specific initiative that you're working on.
Oh, I would love to. There's a lot. You pick
Yeah.
one and I'll talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amy.
You got it. Thank you.
The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Buffalo Computer Graphics. All content is for informational purposes only. Are you or someone you know a resilient hero and would be interested in contributing to our podcast? We would love to hear from you. Please contact us at RHpodcast@buffalocomputergraphics.com.